The years leading up to the American Civil War were a time of immense social, political, and economic upheaval. The nation, deeply divided over the institution of slavery, teetered on the brink of a cataclysmic conflict. In the heart of this turbulent era, within the hallowed halls of Virginia Military Institute, emerged a young man whose name would become synonymous with the Confederacy's struggle, Joseph Johnston. Born into a world defined by tradition, honor, and the complexities of Southern society, Johnston's life would become inextricably intertwined with the defining conflict of his generation. His journey, much like the nation he served, would be fraught with challenges, triumphs, and ultimately, the bitter taste of defeat. But amidst the chaos and bloodshed, Johnston's unwavering commitment to his cause, his strategic brilliance on the battlefield, and his complex legacy as a Confederate leader continue to captivate historians and enthusiasts alike. Join us now as we delve into the life and times of Joseph E. Johnston, a man forever etched in the annals of American military history. On February 3, 1807, Joseph Eggleston Johnston was born at Cherry Grove Plantation, Virginia. This ancestral home shaped young Joseph's upbringing. Virginia's military tradition instilled in him a deep sense of honor and duty. His father, Judge Peter Johnston, served as a cavalry officer in the Revolutionary War. Judge Johnston, a strict disciplinarian, valued education and integrity. Joseph grew up surrounded by tales of his father's exploits. His mother, Mary Wood Johnston, instilled in him a love of literature. Joseph displayed a keen intellect and a thirst for knowledge. He excelled in mathematics and military history. His upbringing laid the foundation for his future successes. At 18, Joseph Johnston secured an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. This esteemed institution, known for its rigorous academic curriculum and demanding physical training, transformed the young Virginian. West Point's emphasis on discipline, strategy, and leadership resonated deeply with Johnston. He thrived, excelling in his studies and demonstrating a natural aptitude for military tactics. His professors often singled him out for praise. Graduating in 1829, ranked 13th in his class, he earned a commission as a second lieutenant. This marked the beginning of a long and distinguished military career. Following his graduation from West Point, Johnston's early military career took him to the untamed wilderness of Florida during the Second Seminole War. This brutal conflict, fought amidst the dense swamps and unforgiving terrain of the Everglades, provided Johnston with his first taste of combat and tested his mettle as a young officer. The Seminoles, skilled warriors fighting for their very survival, presented a formidable challenge to the U.S. Army. Johnston, serving as a lieutenant in the artillery, witnessed firsthand the brutality and complexities of this guerrilla war. He participated in numerous skirmishes and engagements, gaining valuable experience in reconnaissance, logistics, and the challenges of fighting a determined enemy in a hostile environment. The Seminole Wars, while often overshadowed in the annals of American history, proved to be a crucible for Johnston, shaping his tactical acumen and instilling in him a deep respect for the tenacity of his adversaries. The harsh realities of warfare in the Florida Everglades left an indelible mark on Johnston. He witnessed the horrors of combat, the loss of comrades, and the challenges of maintaining morale in a protracted and brutal conflict. These experiences, though trying, would prove invaluable as he navigated the even greater challenges that lay ahead in his military career. The Seminole Wars, while brutal and unforgiving, forged in Johnston a sense of resilience, adaptability, and tactical ingenuity that would define his later successes on the battlefield. They taught him the importance of understanding the terrain, respecting the enemy's capabilities, and adapting his strategies to the ever-changing realities of war. Following the Mexican-American War, Johnston, now a decorated officer with a growing reputation, found himself navigating the often mundane realities of peacetime Army life. The adrenaline rush of battle and the camaraderie forged in conflict were replaced by the routines of garrison duty, training exercises, and administrative tasks. While some officers chafed at the monotony, Johnston approached these duties with the same diligence and professionalism that had characterized his wartime service. He understood that a strong and well-prepared military was essential to safeguarding the nation's interests, even in times of relative peace. Johnston's assignments during this period took him to various posts across the expanding nation, from coastal fortifications to frontier outposts. Each posting presented unique challenges and opportunities, allowing him to further hone his leadership skills and gain a deeper understanding of the nation he served. Despite the lack of battlefield glory, Johnston found purpose in mentoring young officers, improving training protocols, and advocating for military preparedness. He was known for his fair but firm leadership style, his emphasis on discipline and training, and his unwavering commitment to the well-being of his soldiers. These seemingly uneventful years were crucial in shaping Johnston's character and preparing him for the momentous challenges that lay ahead. The lessons learned in peacetime, the relationships forged with fellow officers, and the deep understanding of the Army's strengths and weaknesses would prove invaluable when the nation was once again plunged into the chaos of war. In the 1850s, America's insatiable thirst for expansion propelled its citizens westward. Settlements were carved out of the vast wilderness. Johnston, a dedicated soldier, surveyed routes for the Transcontinental Railroad. This ambitious project aimed to connect the East Coast with California. Leading expeditions through treacherous terrains, Johnston faced many dangers. He approached these challenges with meticulous planning and determination. His detailed reports were invaluable for charting the railroad's course. Johnston's time on the frontier deepened his appreciation for the nation's vastness. He witnessed the transformative power of westward expansion and cultural clashes. In recognition of his logistical acumen and administrative skills, Johnston was appointed Quartermaster General of the U.S. Army in 1855. This crucial position placed him at the helm of the Army's vast supply chain, responsible for equipping, transporting, and provisioning troops stationed across the expanding nation. It was a role that tested his organizational abilities, his attention to detail, and his ability to manage complex operations on a grand scale. Johnston embraced this challenge with characteristic zeal, streamlining supply lines, improving efficiency, and advocating for modernization within the department. He understood that a well-supplied army was essential to success on the battlefield, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that troops had the resources they needed to carry out their missions. His tenure as Quartermaster General provided invaluable insights into the inner workings of the Army, the complexities of wartime logistics, and the challenges of managing a vast and geographically dispersed organization. These experiences would prove essential when he later assumed command of Confederate forces during the Civil War. Johnston's success in this role further enhanced his reputation as a capable and efficient leader, earning him the respect of his superiors and solidifying his place as one of the Army's rising stars. Little did anyone know that his organizational skills and logistical expertise would soon be tested on a scale far greater than anything he could have imagined. Throughout his pre-Civil War career, Johnston's exemplary service and unwavering dedication to duty were recognized through a series of brevet promotions. These were no ordinary promotions but marks of true distinction. These honorary advancements in rank, awarded for gallantry or meritorious service, allowed officers to hold higher ranks than their permanent grades, particularly in recognition of wartime achievements. Imagine the pride and honor in those moments. Johnston's brevet promotions reflected his consistent excellence in various roles and foreshadowed his potential for higher command. His journey was just beginning. His bravery under fire during the Mexican-American War earned him brevets to captain and major, recognizing his courage and leadership in battle. These were moments of valor that would define his legacy. His subsequent performance in peacetime assignments, including his roles in frontier exploration and army logistics, further solidified his reputation as a capable and dependable officer. He was a man of many talents. While brevet promotions carried no additional pay or permanent authority, they served as a testament to an officer's merit and potential. They were symbols of trust and respect. For Johnston, these accolades underscored his growing stature within the Army and foreshadowed the significant responsibilities he would soon shoulder as the nation marched towards disunion. The stakes were rising. These honors, bestowed upon him by the nation he would soon renounce, reflected Johnston's complex relationship with the United States Army. A relationship filled with loyalty and conflict. He was a product of its rigorous training, a beneficiary of its meritocratic system, and a staunch believer in its importance. Yet he would soon find himself leading troops against the very flag he had sworn to defend. A paradox of duty and destiny. As the 1850s progressed, the issue of slavery cast a long shadow over the nation, fueling political discord, social unrest, and the steady drumbeat of disunion. The fragile peace brokered by earlier compromises crumbled under the weight of westward expansion. Abolitionist fervor and the entrenched beliefs of the slaveholding South. Johnston, a Virginian by birth and a product of Southern aristocracy, found himself increasingly torn between his loyalty to the United States Army and his allegiance to his home state. The escalating tensions, fueled by events such as the Fugitive Slave Act, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, created a climate of fear, mistrust, and simmering resentment. The once unthinkable prospect of secession, once a fringe idea, gained traction as a means for the South to protect its way of life and its economic interests. Johnston, a keen observer of national affairs, witnessed these developments with growing unease. He understood the devastating consequences of a divided nation. Yet he also felt the pull of his Southern heritage and the shared anxieties of his fellow Virginians. The looming specter of war presented Johnston with an agonizing dilemma. A choice between upholding his oath to the Union and remaining true to his roots. It was a decision that would test his loyalties, define his legacy, and thrust him onto the center stage of one of America's most tumultuous chapters. As the nation teetered on the brink of civil war, Johnston faced a heart-wrenching decision that mirrored the agonizing choices confronting countless Americans. With the secession of South Carolina in December 1860, followed by other Southern states, the Union he had served faithfully for over 3 decades was dissolving. The tension was palpable. For Johnston, the choice was particularly agonizing. He was a career military officer, deeply committed to his profession and the ideals it represented. Yet the stakes were incredibly high. Yet he was also a Southerner, born and bred in Virginia, a state deeply tied to the institution of slavery and states' rights. The conflict within him was intense. In April 1861, with Virginia's secession imminent, Johnston made the agonizing decision to resign his commission in the United States Army. It was a decision driven by a profound sense of duty to his home state and the belief that his loyalty lay with his people. The weight of this choice was immense. His resignation marked a pivotal turning point in Johnston's life, severing his ties with the only profession he had ever known and setting him on a new and uncertain path. A path filled with mystery and uncertainty. It was a path fraught with danger, sacrifice, and the weight of leading men in a war that would test the very fabric of the nation. The stakes had never been higher. With his resignation from the United States Army, Johnston joined the Confederacy. His decision, shared by many Southern officers, highlighted the nation's profound divisions. Johnston's military experience made him a valuable asset to the Confederacy. The opening salvos of the Civil War echoed across the nation on July 21, 1861, at the Battle of First Bull Run. Joseph E. Johnston, now a Confederate brigadier general, played a crucial role in this early Confederate triumph. As Union forces advanced towards Richmond, Johnston skillfully maneuvered his forces to reinforce the Confederate Army at Manassas Junction. Johnston's timely arrival with reinforcements proved decisive in repelling the Union assault. The inexperienced Union troops were routed back towards Washington, D.C. in a chaotic retreat. The Confederate victory at First Bull Run shattered the belief that the rebellion would be easily crushed. For the South, it was a morale boost, solidifying their resolve. In the aftermath of the Confederate victory at First Bull Run, Joseph E. Johnston faced a strategic dilemma. The Confederate Army, though victorious, was outnumbered and outgunned by the Union. Johnston advocated for a cautious and defensive strategy, seeking to preserve his limited manpower. This approach often brought him into conflict with Confederate President Jefferson Davis, creating tension between Johnston and the Confederate leadership. The spring of 1862 brought a dramatic change of fortune for Joseph E. Johnston and the Confederate Army. With the Union Army of the Potomac advancing up the Virginia Peninsula, Johnston faced a formidable challenge. Johnston conducted a series of skillful delaying actions, withdrawing his forces slowly towards Richmond. The stage was set for a pivotal clash that would test Johnston's tactical skills. On May 31st and June 1st, 1862, the Battle of Seven Pines raged near Richmond. Johnston launched a daring offensive, seeking to exploit a perceived weakness in the Union lines. During the fighting, Johnston was severely wounded, forcing him to relinquish command. The Battle of Seven Pines, though a Confederate victory, proved costly for the South. Johnston's injuries paved the way for Robert E. Lee to assume leadership of the Army of Northern Virginia. With Joseph E. Johnston sidelined by his wounds, Confederate President Jefferson Davis turned to Robert E. Lee. Lee's appointment marked a significant shift in Confederate strategy, from Johnston's cautious approach to Lee's more audacious style. Lee believed that the South's best chance for victory lay in seizing the initiative. The change in command marked a turning point in the Civil War. As Robert E. Lee commanded in the East, Joseph E. Johnston was tasked with halting Union advances in the Western Theater. Johnston advocated for a concentrated defense of key points, particularly Vicksburg. The fall of Vicksburg to General Ulysses S. Grant in July 1863 dealt a devastating blow to the Confederacy. Johnston faced criticism for his inability to prevent its fall. In the spring of 1864, Joseph E. Johnston faced General William T. Sherman. Johnston employed delaying actions, utilizing the rugged terrain of northern Georgia. However, Johnston's tactics drew criticism from Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Despite Johnston's skillful defense, Sherman's relentless advance continued. On July 17, 1864, Confederate President Jefferson Davis relieved Joseph E. Johnston of command. Davis's decision, motivated by frustration with Johnston's tactics, remains a subject of intense debate. Johnston's removal from command sent shockwaves through the Confederacy. Whether Johnston could have altered the outcome of the Atlanta campaign is still hotly debated. February 1865, the Confederacy teetered on the brink of collapse. Union General William T. Sherman's march through Georgia had shattered Southern morale. In this desperate hour, Confederate President Jefferson Davis turned once more to Joseph E. Johnston. Johnston accepted the command, driven by a sense of duty to his nation. He inherited a battered and demoralized army, outmatched by Sherman's forces. Johnston resolved to make a stand, aiming to delay Sherman's advance. The Carolinas campaign, fought amidst the devastation of a war-torn land, would prove to be Johnston's final act on the stage of the Civil War. With his outnumbered and outgunned army, Johnston sought to delay Sherman's advance, employing a strategy of maneuver and defense, striking when opportunities arose and withdrawing before his forces could be decisively engaged. At Bentonville, North Carolina, on March 19 to 21, 1865, Johnston launched a surprise attack on a wing of Sherman's army, hoping to achieve a decisive victory that might breathe new life into the dwindling Confederate hopes. While initially successful, Johnston's attack faltered in the face of determined Union resistance and the arrival of Union reinforcements. Realizing that a prolonged engagement could lead to the destruction of his army, Johnston made the difficult decision to withdraw, prioritizing the preservation of his men's lives over the pursuit of a costly and ultimately unattainable victory. Despite Johnston's skillful maneuvering and the tenacity of his troops, the outcome of the Carolinas campaign was never in doubt. Sherman's relentless advance, coupled with the Confederacy's dwindling resources and collapsing morale, made a Southern victory virtually impossible. As news of Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse reached Johnston's headquarters, the futility of further resistance became clear. On April 17, 1865, Johnston and Sherman met at Bennett Place to discuss terms of surrender. The nation, still reeling from the trauma of war and Lincoln's death, yearned for peace. Johnston sought generous terms from Sherman, who proved receptive to Johnston's requests. The surrender terms set a precedent for peaceful demobilization and the reintegration of the South into the Union. The years following the Civil War were a time of profound change and uncertainty for the South. And for Joseph E. Johnston, the transition from Confederate general to private citizen proved to be a challenging one. Haunted by the memories of war and the knowledge of the South's defeat, Johnston sought to reconcile his past actions with the realities of a reunited nation. Unlike some former Confederates who clung to bitterness and resentment, Johnston accepted the outcome of the war and urged his fellow Southerners to do the same. He recognized that the South's best hope for a prosperous future lay in reconciliation, not in clinging to the ashes of the Confederacy. In his post-war writings and speeches, Johnston defended his conduct during the war, arguing that he had always acted in the best interests of his men and the Confederacy. However, he also acknowledged the bravery and determination of his Union opponents, recognizing that the Civil War had been a tragedy for both sides. Johnston's post-war reflections, marked by a mix of pride in his service, sorrow for the losses suffered, and a pragmatic acceptance of defeat, provide valuable insights into the complex emotions and challenges faced by former Confederates as they navigated the uncertain waters of Reconstruction and sought to rebuild their lives in a nation forever changed by the war. The guns had fallen silent. The echoes of battle now a distant memory. The Confederacy lay in ruins, its grand ambitions shattered. And Joseph E. Johnston, once a proud Confederate general, found himself navigating a world turned upside down. The South he knew, built on the foundation of slavery and states' rights, was no more. It was a land transformed. In its place stood a region grappling with the physical and emotional scars of war. Its economy shattered, its social order in upheaval, and its future uncertain. Johnston, like many of his fellow Southerners, faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life amidst the wreckage of war. The challenge was immense. The plantation economy that had defined his upbringing lay in shambles, a relic of a bygone era, and the social order he had once known was irrevocably altered. Change was the new constant. Yet amidst the uncertainty and turmoil, Johnston emerged as a voice of reconciliation, a beacon of hope. He urged his fellow Southerners to accept the outcome of the war and embrace the challenges of reunion. It was a call to unity. He recognized that clinging to the bitterness of defeat would only hinder the South's recovery. Forward was the only way. Instead, Johnston advocated for a pragmatic approach, a path of practicality and progress. He urged his fellow citizens to embrace the opportunities presented by a reunited nation, however imperfect that reunion might be. His calls for reconciliation, while not always well received in a region still grappling with the humiliation of defeat, reflected Johnston's pragmatism and his deep-seated belief in the South's resilience. He believed in a brighter future. He believed that the South's best hope for a brighter future lay not in clinging to the lost cause of the Confederacy, but in embracing the challenges and opportunities of a new era. A new dawn was on the horizon. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. The post-war years saw Joseph E. Johnston transition from a military leader to a reluctant but vocal participant in the political arena. His wartime experiences, coupled with his reputation for integrity and his pragmatic approach to the challenges facing the South, thrust him into the role of an advocate for his former soldiers and a voice of moderation in a political landscape often characterized by extremism and division. In 1877, Johnston was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Virginia's Richmond district. His election, a testament to his enduring popularity in his home state, provided him with a platform to champion the interests of his constituents, many of whom were struggling to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of war and Reconstruction. Johnston used his position in Congress to advocate for policies aimed at healing the wounds of war, promoting economic development in the South, and securing the rights of all citizens. He believed that the federal government had a responsibility to assist the South in its recovery, not punish it for its secession. His foray into politics, though relatively brief, demonstrated Johnston's commitment to public service and his willingness to engage in the messy realities of post-war governance. He recognized that the process of reconciliation required not only words but also concrete actions aimed at rebuilding trust and fostering a more just and equitable society. With the South's traditional agrarian economy in tatters, Johnston, like many of his contemporaries, recognized the urgent need for economic diversification and modernization. He saw in the expanding railroad network a symbol of progress and an engine for economic growth, offering exciting opportunities for investment, job creation, and the reintegration of the South into the national economy. Johnston's wartime experience in logistics and transportation, coupled with his understanding of the South's need for improved infrastructure, led him to pursue business ventures in the railroad industry. He served as president of the Atlantic and Western Railroad and held leadership positions in other rail companies, using his influence to promote railroad expansion and connect the South to the burgeoning markets of the North and West. Johnston viewed railroads as a means to bridge the physical and economic divides that had long separated the South from the rest of the nation. He believed that improved transportation infrastructure was essential for the South's economic recovery and its reintegration into the national fabric. Johnston's business ventures, while not always successful, reflected his entrepreneurial spirit and his belief in the South's potential for economic revitalization. He recognized that the region's future prosperity depended on embracing new industries, modernizing its infrastructure, and forging stronger economic ties with the rest of the nation. The passage of time, as unforgiving as any battlefield, gradually took its toll on Joseph E. Johnston. The once robust general who had endured the hardships of multiple wars and the turmoil of a nation divided, found his physical strength waning as the 19th century drew to a close. The wounds of war, both physical and emotional, lingered, leaving him increasingly frail and susceptible to illness. Despite his declining health, Johnston's mind remained sharp, his memory vivid, and his interest in the world around him undimmed. He continued to follow political developments, engage in lively discussions about the war, and offer his insights on the challenges facing the nation. His home in Washington, D.C. became a gathering place for veterans, historians, and those seeking to understand the complexities of the Civil War and its aftermath. Johnston, always a gracious host, welcomed these visitors, sharing his recollections, offering his perspectives, and contributing to the growing body of knowledge about one of America's most defining periods. As his health deteriorated, Johnston faced his final days with the same stoicism and dignity that had characterized his long and eventful life. The former general, who had witnessed firsthand the horrors of war and the resilience of the human spirit, approached death with a sense of peace and acceptance, his legacy forever intertwined with the tumultuous era that had shaped him. On March 21, 1891, Joseph E. Johnston, aged 84, passed away peacefully at his home in Washington, D.C. His death marked the passing of one of the last high-ranking Confederate generals, prompting reflection on his controversial legacy. Newspapers recounted Johnston's strategic brilliance and devotion to duty, but also questioned his cautious approach and disagreements with leadership. Johnston's funeral in Richmond drew thousands, solidifying his place in Southern memory. Yet, his legacy remains complex, reflecting enduring divisions and unresolved questions of the Civil War. Over a century after his death, Joseph E. Johnston's legacy continues to be a subject of debate and reevaluation. His strategic brilliance and tactical acumen are generally acknowledged, even by his critics. However, his cautious approach to warfare, his strained relationship with Confederate leadership, and his role in prolonging a devastating conflict continue to fuel controversy. Some historians view Johnston as a tragic figure, a skilled commander whose talents were undermined by political interference, logistical challenges, and the inherent weaknesses of the Confederacy he served. They argue that his cautious approach to warfare, while often frustrating to those who craved decisive victories, was the most prudent strategy given the South's limited resources. Others, however, contend that Johnston's cautious nature ultimately hindered the Confederate war effort, arguing that his reluctance to seize the initiative and take bold risks contributed to the South's defeat. They point to his disagreements with Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his removal from command during crucial campaigns as evidence of his unwillingness to fully embrace the Confederacy's cause. The debate over Johnston's legacy reflects the broader struggle to come to terms with the complex and often contradictory narratives surrounding the Civil War. His story serves as a reminder that history is rarely black and white, and that even those who fight for lost causes can possess admirable qualities and contribute to the enduring narrative of a nation.